They told me I wasn't worth the investment, that my future didn't deserve the same chance as someone else's. But 4 years later, in front of a packed auditorium, something happened that left every doubter speechless. You won't believe how it all unfolded, and what I did when they finally had to face the truth. If you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or forced to prove your worth from scratch, this story is for you. Stay with me, because the moment everything changed is one you'll never forget. My name is Claire Whitmore, and if you had crossed paths with me a few years ago, you probably wouldn't have remembered me. I was the background character in my own life, the one who stayed quiet, made space for everyone else, and tried not to need too much. I didn't ask for attention, just a little fairness. But life doesn't always hand you what you deserve. It teaches you how to rise when no one's watching. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about redemption, self-worth, and the quiet kind of strength that builds in the dark, the kind that no one believes in, until it walks across a graduation stage and takes the mic. I never imagined I'd be standing on that stage, under blinding lights, while strangers applauded and my family sat frozen in the front row, eyes wide, jaws tight. For the first time in my life, they weren't the center of the room. I was. Everything I had built in silence, every sacrifice I had buried deep, was now undeniable. My name echoed through the auditorium, and I saw something flicker in their faces: disbelief, and maybe regret. The thing is, this wasn't just a graduation. It was my moment of truth. Not because I needed their validation, but because I didn't. Every time they said, "You're just being dramatic," or "She needs our help more," it led me here. I learned how to rise without a cheering section. And standing there, diploma in one hand, a national award in the other, I realized I was the storm they didn't see coming. The applause wasn't for my grades. It was for my resilience, my business, my journey from being dismissed to becoming unforgettable. People from the university administration, professors, even company execs were on their feet. And yet, all I could focus on were my parents. They clapped, sure, but slower than everyone else, as if they were still trying to process that their backup plan had just become the headliner. My sister, though, she stood up, teary-eyed, proud. For once, we weren't rivals in their twisted narrative. We were equals, maybe even allies. I'd spent years in her shadow, but today, she was the one looking up to me. And honestly, that meant more than anything I ever expected from my parents. What no one else knew was how far I'd crawled to get there. How many nights I cried on a borrowed mattress in a tiny room that smelled like mildew. How many jobs I juggled. How many times I questioned if all this effort was even worth it. But now, standing there, the spotlight warm against my face, I finally got my answer. When they handed me the mic for the student address, my hands didn't tremble. My voice didn't crack. I had rehearsed those words not just for weeks, but for years. I'd written them in my mind every time I was told to be quiet, or when my achievements were brushed off like dust on the table. This moment wasn't luck. It was long overdue. But as I looked out into the crowd, there was still that ache. That quiet voice in my chest that remembered every overlooked birthday, every missed school event, every "not now, we're focused on your sister." I had waited for this day not just to graduate, but to be seen. And even surrounded by hundreds, part of me still felt like that 12-year-old kid sketching alone while everyone praised her sibling. People say revenge is bitter. Revenge is... But honestly, this felt healing. Not because I hurt anyone, but because I finally proved that I didn't need their support to succeed. I had built something real with my own hands, my own late nights, and my own relentless drive. And now, the world knew it. Even if my parents didn't understand how I got here. They say trauma doesn't make you strong. It reveals the strength you already had. And that was me. I didn't become impressive to win their love back. I became impressive because I had no other choice. Survival turned into strategy. And strategy turned into something bigger than I ever thought possible. But here's the thing. When you're finally celebrated after being invisible for so long, the joy feels different. It's not just happiness, it's justice. It's relief. It's standing in the light without apologizing. And as that audience clapped for me, I realized I wasn't broken after all, I was blooming. Looking back, I never expected my story to resonate with strangers more than with the people who raised me. But maybe that's the point. Sometimes it takes losing someone's approval to finally build your own voice. And when that voice is heard, loud, clear, unstoppable, it echoes further than you ever imagined. I wasn't just the girl they forgot to support. I was the woman who rose in spite of it. And no, I didn't have a picture-perfect dorm or fancy family dinners. What I had was grit. I learned to budget, to hustle, to survive on caffeine and faith. And slowly, piece by piece, I created a life that had nothing to do with their plans, and everything to do with mine. The truth is, I used to think success meant proving them wrong, but now, I understand that success is proving yourself right. Trusting that your dreams are valid, even if no one claps when you say them out loud, even if no one's listening. And here I was, 4 years later, with my story in the university newspaper, my business thriving, and a consulting firm ready to hire me, all from a girl they once told, "She deserves it, but you don't." Funny how life works when you stop asking for permission to shine. That day on stage was more than a ceremony. It was a quiet revolution, a declaration that I didn't just survive their neglect, I transcended it. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there would hear this story and realize they could too. There's a sentence that lives rent-free in my mind. I remember it word for word, the way some people remember songs or prayers. My dad had just put down his fork at the dinner table and said, "We're investing in Lauren's future. She's always had more potential." My mom didn't correct him. She just nodded. Like my absence from their plan was a logical choice, not a heartbreaking betrayal. That night, I didn't cry. I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling, letting the silence wrap around me like armor. But something inside me cracked. And through that crack, something stronger began to grow. I stopped hoping they'd change. I stopped trying to earn what should have been given freely. That sentence became the blueprint for my independence. It wasn't just about money. It was about being told, without hesitation, that my dreams weren't worth the same investment, that I was somehow less. And once that seed of inferiority is planted by the people who are supposed to believe in you the most, it takes years to unlearn, years to even question whether they were wrong. But that dinner, that moment, it was the turning point, not because it broke me, but because it woke me up. I finally saw the truth of my family dynamics, stripped of the hopeful illusions I used to cling to. And in that painful clarity, I made a silent promise. I will build a future so undeniable that they'll be forced to see what they chose to overlook. Some stories begin with joy. Mine began with rejection. And honestly, I wouldn't rewrite it. Because in the end, that rejection became the match that lit the fire. And that fire carried me farther than their version of love ever could. From that moment forward, I started moving differently. I didn't scream or lash out. I just got to work. While my parents gushed over Lauren's debate trophies and political science dreams, I was studying loan options, juggling part-time jobs, and Googling how to win scholarships at 2 a.m. I stopped waiting for them to notice. I started planning for a life where they didn't need to. There's something wild that happens when no one expects anything from you. You get to surprise them. I wasn't the smartest in every class, but I was relentless. I tracked every dollar I earned, created spreadsheets for my future, and took notes like they were gold. While Lauren had planners filled with parties, I had planners filled with strategy. Every "you're so independent" compliment they threw at me like a backhanded gift just fueled me more. They didn't realize I was independent by necessity, not by choice. I didn't want to handle everything alone, but I learned to, because depending on people who don't show up hurts more than doing it all yourself. Sometimes when no one believes in you, you start to believe more in yourself. Not in a movie montage way, but in a quiet, gritty, I'll figure it out even if it kills me way. That's how I got through my first year of college. Not with ease, but with a kind of invisible armor forged through years of emotional neglect. And maybe that's what built me into someone unstoppable. Because when your self-worth isn't rooted in approval, it's harder for people to take it from you. I didn't become fearless. I became resilient. There's a difference. Fear never left. I just stopped letting it win. The difference between my journey and Lauren's started long before college, but it became impossible to ignore when the acceptance letters came. We both got into the same school. Her for political science, me for business. I was over the moon, until I saw their reactions. My mom said, "That's nice, Claire," then turned to Lauren and said, "We always knew you had it in you." They popped champagne for her. I got a nod. Then came the real blow, the financial conversation. Dad said casually, like it was nothing, "We've been saving for Lauren's tuition since she was born." I waited, hoping maybe they had something tucked away for me too. But no, they looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You'll figure it out, you're the resourceful one." Like that was a compliment. Like being abandoned was a badge of honor. Lauren never rubbed it in. She didn't have to. I watched her pack her dorm decor, new laptop, and matching bedding set while I stuffed thrifted sheets into a hand-me-down duffel bag. She had a family send-off party. I had gas money from my grandmother and a hug that smelled like lavender and hope. We were going to the same school, just in entirely different worlds. Still, I didn't hate her. I envied her. And I resented the system that made one child feel chosen and the other feel optional. But deep down, I also knew this would be the thing that made me different. Stronger, sharper, less afraid to be uncomfortable. Because while Lauren was being cushioned, I was being carved into someone unbreakable. It's wild how people will call you independent while actively choosing not to help you, as if needing help makes you weak. But the truth is, real strength isn't about doing it alone. It's about becoming powerful even when no one shows up for you. From the outside, the Whitmore family looked like a commercial for the American dream. Two-story house, a swing set in the backyard, seasonal wreaths on the front door, neighbors waved, holiday cards were always sent on time, smiles in every photo. But behind the camera, the smiles were a little too tight, the air a little too heavy. Like something was always being swallowed. My parents weren't villains. They were polite, educated, predictable. My dad, Richard, was a financial advisor. My mom, Deborah, taught literature at the local high school. They knew how to host dinner parties, how to keep up appearances, how to look like a balanced family. But love? Love was conditional. It came in doses, and mine was always smaller. My sister Lauren was the center of their world. From the time we were toddlers, it was clear. She was the golden child. Her drawings got pinned to the fridge. Her science fair medals got framed. She was bubbly, charismatic, always 5 steps ahead in their eyes. And me? I was just there, the quieter one, the observer, the forgotten second paragraph. I started to notice the difference early. One Christmas, Lauren got a keyboard with LED lights and a music stand. I got a clearance bin sketch pad and a 6-pack of socks. "You're so practical, Claire," Mom said with a smile, as if that somehow justified the imbalance. I smiled back. That was the beginning of a long habit I still haven't fully broken. Smiling through the sting. The weirdest part is that I didn't even want the spotlight. I just wanted equal ground, a sense that I mattered as much as she did. But every birthday, every parent-teacher night, every school play made the answer painfully clear. I was loved, sure, but not celebrated. And that difference? It shapes you in ways no one else sees. It wasn't always obvious. The unfairness didn't scream, it whispered. Like when Lauren got a new backpack every school year, and I got one more season out of mine. Or how they both showed up to her soccer games with banners and snacks, but barely glanced at the calendar when my art exhibit was scheduled. "We'll try to swing by," Dad would say. They never did. Even teacher conferences felt different. For Lauren, it was a full report, follow-up emails, future planning. For me, she's quiet, but she gets the work done. And that was that. I became the reliable one, the self-sufficient one. But self-sufficient was just a pretty way of saying forgotten. And the worst part? I got good at pretending it didn't hurt. I remember one spring evening Lauren had a spelling bee. My parents were front row, cameras ready, cheering like she was at the Olympics. A week later, I won a local art competition. I left the ribbon on the kitchen counter. No one mentioned it. It stayed there for days, next to a pile of unopened mail. That ribbon became a metaphor. I existed, but just barely. When I finally asked why they didn't come to see my project in the district showcase, Mom said, "Art's not a real future, Claire, but it's cute that you enjoy it." That phrase, "it's cute," became another tiny dagger. I wasn't dreaming too big. I was dreaming in the wrong direction. And in their eyes, that meant it didn't deserve attention. It's strange how something so subtle can weigh so much. No one yelled. No one hit. But the absence of belief, that's its own kind of violence. And for me, it left a scar that no one else could see. But I carried it everywhere. The summer before middle school, we spent 2 weeks at my grandmother's lake house. It was supposed to be a bonding trip. No phones, no distractions, just family time. Lauren hated it. I, on the other hand, loved it. There were trees to draw, birds to observe, pages to fill. I felt alive there. And it was the first time someone actually saw me. Grandma Jean wasn't like my parents. She didn't compare us. She didn't rank us. She watched me draw for hours and said, "You don't just look at things. You understand them." That sentence stuck with me longer than any praise my parents ever gave. For the first time, someone valued how I saw the world, not just what I produced for it. When we got home, I showed my sketchbook to Mom. Her response, "That's sweet, honey, but you'll grow out of it." Then she called Lauren over to show her a flyer for a debate summer camp. She signed her up that same day. Me? I never got asked what I wanted. And eventually, I stopped offering an answer. That was the summer I learned that visibility isn't always earned. It's given, and mine was rationed. I started noticing that when we told family stories, I was barely in them. Remember when Lauren said that hilarious thing at the beach? Oh, and Lauren's award that year. I was a footnote in my own family history. I didn't want applause. I wanted acknowledgement. A sentence. A gesture. Something. But in a house where success had a very specific look, straight A's, extroversion, trophies, I was never what they were looking for. I was just a girl with a sketchbook, slowly learning that in their story, I'd have to write my own chapters. My parents were big on the word fair. They loved to say, "We treat our daughters equally." But that word didn't mean what they thought it did. Equal isn't giving us the same dinner. It's giving us the same attention, the same belief, the same room to dream. And when I looked around, all the oxygen in the room seemed to belong to Lauren. When Lauren joined the school choir, they bought her a new dress for the concert and recorded every performance. When I made it into the regional math team, I got a ride. Just a ride. No clapping, no photo. No, "We're proud of you." And when I finally got the courage to say something, Mom smiled and said, "You don't need praise, Claire. You're already so focused." Like that was a compliment. I didn't realize at the time that I was being emotionally managed, taught to feel grateful for leftovers. That kind of grooming makes you doubt your own hunger. I stopped asking for encouragement and convinced myself I didn't need it. But the truth is, every kid needs someone to notice when they try. Not just when they win. Lauren wasn't the villain. She never asked for the spotlight. They just gave it to her. And I didn't blame her for taking it. But there's a pain that comes from watching someone else be watered while you're left to dry out in the same soil. I was growing too, but in silence. And honestly, that silence became a skill. I got good at listening, at observing, at building my inner world while theirs spun around performances, checklists, and appearances. But deep down, I knew. I was building something they'd never see coming. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were always chicken and rice for dinner. Comfort food, routine. I came home from school excited, really excited. I'd been selected for an enrichment program at the local university, something for exceptionally driven students. It was the first time a teacher had used that word about me. Exceptional. I laid the letter on the kitchen table like it was a trophy. Mom read it, nodded, and said, "That's nice, Claire. We'll look into it." Then she looked up and asked Lauren if she'd remembered to pack for her student council retreat. Just like that, the moment passed. My big moment became background noise. That night, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. A quiet one. I would stop chasing their approval. I would stop waiting to be picked. If they didn't see my value, I'd build a life so powerful, so meaningful, that they'd be forced to see it eventually. But not for them. For me. For the girl who sat quietly at the dinner table while her future was dismissed in passing. It wasn't an angry decision. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply a shift. Like a door quietly closing in the middle of the night. I began putting my energy into planning, learning, applying. I stayed late after school to talk with teachers. I researched colleges like other kids researched makeup trends. I became laser-focused, not on being loved, but on building leverage. And let me tell you something. There's nothing more powerful than a girl who stops waiting to be chosen and starts choosing herself. That's where everything began to change. The one person who never treated me like an afterthought was my grandma, Jean. She lived in a modest cottage 2 hours away, surrounded by books, plants, and peace. Every summer, I'd spend a few weeks with her, and those weeks became my sanctuary. She noticed my sketches. She asked about my dreams. And most importantly, she listened without fixing me. One afternoon, I was sitting on her porch sketching the lake when she said, "You have a rare gift, Claire. You see stories in silence. That's something the world needs." I didn't say much, but her words stayed with me. They were seeds that would take root when I needed them most. Grandma didn't have money, but what she gave me was richer than anything my parents ever did. Belief. She filled me with books about people who changed the world quietly, persistently. She taught me that just because no one's clapping doesn't mean you're not doing something incredible. She saw value in who I was, not who she wanted me to be. When I finally told her about the university program I got into, and how my parents brushed it off, she didn't get angry. She just looked at me, eyes soft but fierce, and said, "Then go anyway. Don't let small minds shrink your vision." That sentence lit something in me, a spark I refused to let die. From that moment on, I stopped trying to be visible in the places that couldn't see me. I started planting my seeds elsewhere, quietly, intentionally, because one day, I knew they'd bloom, and when they did, the world would know what my family refused to see. High school was when I stopped hoping they'd change. I stopped leaving my awards on the kitchen counter. I stopped calling out from my bedroom just to hear, "That's nice, Claire." I decided I wasn't going to wait to be seen anymore. I was going to build in silence. And that silence, it became my power. I signed up for business club sophomore year on a whim. Most kids joined for their college resumes. I joined because I liked the way numbers made sense. They didn't play favorites. Either the plan worked or it didn't. Either the equation balanced or it failed. Unlike my family, numbers had logic, and they respected effort. That year, I entered a local entrepreneurship competition. I built a mock-up of a student budgeting app, stayed up every night learning how to present, how to pitch, how to hold a room's attention even when I felt invisible inside it. When I won first place, the judges said, "You think like a strategist." I smiled politely, but inside, I was screaming. I came home and told my mom over dinner, I won the competition. She nodded and said, "Can you remind Lauren to call her SAT tutor tonight?" That was it. That moment, strangely, didn't crush me. It confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. My worth didn't live in their reaction. Every time they ignored me, I got sharper. Every dismissal became motivation. I wasn't chasing trophies. I was building blueprints. Quietly, strategically, the foundation of something real, something they'd never take credit for. Junior year was brutal. I picked up a part-time job at a coffee shop downtown, working 15 to 20 hours a week after school. Not because I had to, but because I knew I'd need it later. I was already planning for college, already assuming I'd be financing it myself. While my classmates talked about prom and ski trips, I was doing inventory and saving tips. Every Friday night, I came home exhausted, smelling like espresso and almond milk, while Lauren came home from her club meetings, full of energy and stories. Our parents always asked her how her night went. They never asked me, and I never offered. I had stopped measuring love by attention. My focus had shifted to self-preservation. There were moments I wanted to scream, like when Dad told Lauren, "You're going to do big things," right in front of me, as if I were invisible. Or when Mom said, "Claire's always been low maintenance," as if that was praise. But I swallowed the bitterness. I needed that energy for other things. College applications, side gigs, scholarships. Sometimes I studied during my work breaks. Other times I used tip money to print business plan drafts at the library. I once finished a full AP economics paper between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. after closing shift. No one knew. No one clapped. No one said, "We're proud of you." But I kept going, because I wasn't building for applause. I was building for freedom. That year, I made the honor roll every quarter. I saved over $3,000. I created the first version of a real business plan. And through all of it, I kept showing up with a tired smile and a backpack full of quiet ambition. Because some of us don't get the easy path. We build our own one late night at a time. Senior year came fast, and so did the college letters. Lauren and I applied to the same top-tier university, Westbridge. She for political science, me for business. When our acceptance letters arrived on the same day, I swear I stopped breathing. I opened mine in the kitchen, hands shaking. Full acceptance, business program, all me. I turned to my parents, heart pounding, and said, "I got in." My mom looked up, smiled briefly, and said, "That's great. Honey." 5 minutes later, Lauren burst through the door screaming, "I got in too!" And everything changed. The room exploded into celebration. Champagne, music, hugs, phone calls. For her, only her. I sat at the table with my unopened, sparkling cider, realizing I had just been erased again. Same achievement, same school, but in their minds, only one of us was worthy of a party. I excused myself quietly and stood in the hallway, letting the noise fade behind me. That was the night I knew I'd be doing this alone. 2 weeks later, we had the talk, the infamous one. Dad sat us down and said, "We've saved for Lauren's tuition. Claire, you'll have to explore other options. Loans, grants, maybe community college for the first year." He said it like it was logical, like I should have expected it. Like they hadn't just told me, in so many words, "She's worth the investment. You're not." I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded, left the table, and stared out the window. Something inside me hardened that night. Not in a bitter way, but in a focused way. If they wouldn't invest in me, then I'd become my own investor. The night after the college funding conversation, I didn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling, arms crossed over my chest, like I was trying to hold myself together. I wasn't surprised, but that didn't make it hurt any less. I had worked. I had earned. But I had been discarded like a footnote in someone else's biography. And still, I refused to give up. By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't polished, but it was mine. First, I made a list of every scholarship I could find. Then I started emailing teachers for recommendation letters. I created a spreadsheet so detailed it had color-coded tabs. While most of my classmates were planning senior skip days, I was drafting financial aid essays. I told no one, not even Lauren. This was my war, and I didn't need spectators. After school, I'd head straight to the coffee shop for my shifts. Then I'd come home, lock myself in my room, and dive into applications. I filled out 27 in a month. I lost count of how many times I answered the same question. What challenges have you overcome? My answer became a version of the truth that felt safe. I've learned resilience through independence. What I really wanted to say was, my family never saw me, so I had to become something they couldn't ignore. But vulnerability doesn't always get you money. Strategy does. And that's what I had now, strategy. Not bitterness, not desperation. A clear, driven plan to fund my future without them. If they weren't going to hand me a ladder, I'd build one. One nail, one deadline, one tear-stained scholarship essay at a time. One day, after staying late to work on my financial aid packet, I ran into Ms. Peterson, my AP Econ teacher, by the vending machines. I must have looked exhausted, because she asked, "You okay, Claire?" I told her the truth, quietly, with my head down. I was trying to fund college on my own. She didn't say much then, just nodded and said, "Come see me tomorrow." The next day, she handed me a printed packet. Local scholarships, internship leads, a letter she had personally written to the department head at Westbridge. I was stunned. I had never been anyone's special case before. Ms. Peterson looked me in the eye and said, "You're not invisible, Claire. You're just not loud. And people like you move mountains quietly." That moment changed me. It was the first time a teacher saw not just my grades, but my fight. She became my unofficial mentor, reviewing essays, editing applications, making calls. I even got a scholarship from a local businesswomen's network she connected me to. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to believe this might work. Meanwhile, my grandma Jean was calling me every few days, checking on progress, cheering me on from 2 hours away. She couldn't help with money, but she poured belief into me like water into dry soil. "You've always had something they can't teach," she'd say. "That's your edge." And between Ms. Peterson, Grandma, and the quiet strength I was building daily, I realized something. Family isn't always the people who raise you. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand in your corner, even when it costs them nothing to look away. By graduation day, I had pieced together a fragile but functioning plan. Federal aid, small private scholarships, some loan approvals with Grandma as co-signer. It wasn't perfect, but it would get me through the first year at Westbridge. I had also found cheap off-campus housing with 3 roommates I'd never met. No backup plan, just grit. Lauren got a whole send-off party. New dorm decor, a custom laptop, dinner reservations. Me? I got a wave goodbye from the front door. "Good luck," Mom said, like I was heading to a job interview, not the next chapter of my life. I packed my thrifted bags into my 10-year-old car and drove away with the windows down and my music loud, just to drown out the silence. When I arrived at the apartment, it was smaller than I expected. Cracked walls, uneven floors, a mattress on the floor. But to me, it was freedom. It was mine. I cried that night, not because I was scared, but because I'd made it. Not to the finish line, but to the starting gate. And I had done it with nothing but hustle and belief. The next day, I walked to campus in worn sneakers, carrying a backpack held together by safety pins. I passed by freshmen with their parents, shiny new laptops, and move-in day gift bags. I looked down at my calloused hands and thought, no one handed me anything, but I'm still here. That was enough to keep walking. That first week, I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't just survive, I'd thrive. I didn't come this far to fade into the background. Not this time. I had a vision. I had fire. And I had everything to prove. Not to them, but to me. The first semester at Westbridge felt like being thrown into the deep end with bricks in my backpack. Everyone else seemed to have a safety net. Parents covering rent, sending care packages, helping navigate campus life. Me? I was mapping my class schedule around my work shifts and trying to stretch frozen meals across the week. No room for mistakes. I worked mornings at a campus cafe taking 5 a.m. shifts just to make it to my 8 a.m. class. At night, I restocked shelves at a bookstore downtown. Sleep became optional. I wasn't just juggling responsibilities. I was calculating survival. Rent, books, groceries, Wi-Fi. It all lived in my head like open tabs I couldn't afford to close. And yet, something in that chaos felt alive. I was exhausted, yes, but I was in motion, moving towards something no one else had paved for me. While others were building resumes, I was building character. I was learning the cost of independence, literally and emotionally, and realizing that everything I gained, I truly earned. There were moments of doubt, of course, nights when my body ached and I couldn't remember the last time I had a real meal. But when that voice in my head whispered, "You can't do this," another one answered louder, "You already are." That dialogue became my anthem. I had no choice but to succeed. Failure wasn't funded. I didn't tell my parents what I was going through. What would have been the point? They'd already made their priorities clear. So instead, I held myself. I cheered for myself. And in those early months, I started realizing that self-trust might be the most unshakable foundation I'd ever build. The thing about doing it all alone is no one claps for you. No one sees the 3 a.m. breakdowns, the skipped meals, the quiet victories, but those invisible moments, that's where the real strength lives. That's where I found mine. In between shifts, in between classes, in between choosing between laundry or lunch, I kept showing up. Even when my hands shook from caffeine and exhaustion, even when my eyes burned from lack of sleep, I took notes like they were gospel, recorded lectures so I could listen while shelving books. My professors started noticing me, not because I was flashy, but because I was always prepared, always pushing. One professor, Dr. Keller, pulled me aside after a group presentation. "You lead like someone who's had to earn every inch," he said. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. But those words sat with me. Maybe people were starting to see it. Not the struggle, but the grit beneath the surface. Social media made it worse some days. I'd scroll past Lauren's dorm selfies, sorority mixers, family weekend photos. There she was, smiling with our parents in coordinated outfits, while I sat in my $40 desk chair eating microwaved pasta for the third night in a row. But instead of resentment, I started to feel something unexpected: peace. Because even though I had less, I was building more. While they gave Lauren a roadmap, I was designing a blueprint, one that no one could take from me. And that quiet strength, it began to shape not just how I moved, but who I was becoming. Zoe changed everything. We weren't close at first, just two strangers sharing an off-campus apartment with mismatched dishes and paper-thin walls. But she noticed things, like how I always ate late, or how I never joined the others for movie nights. One evening, I came home to a post-it on the fridge: "Made extra spaghetti, it's yours." It sounds silly, but that gesture cracked something open in me. I hadn't received that kind of kindness in years. Real, no-strings-attached care. I texted her a quiet thank you, and she replied, "You looked like you needed a win today." That line stayed with me, because I did. I needed someone to just see me. Over time, Zoe became my lifeline. She started waiting up when I worked late, helping me study when my eyes blurred. "You do everything alone, but you don't have to," she said one night, handing me tea. "Let me help. That's what real friends do." It took me a while to believe her, but once I did, I felt less alone in the world. She never made me feel like a burden, never pitied me. She respected my hustle, but also challenged me when I pushed too hard. When she found out I was skipping meals to save money, she cooked double, quietly, without making it a scene. She didn't rescue me. She walked beside me. There's a difference. Zoe reminded me that strength doesn't mean isolation, that receiving care doesn't make you weaker. It makes you human. And for the first time since I left home, I started to feel like I wasn't just surviving, I was healing. There's something about stories like mine, quiet, messy, resilient, that often go untold. And if any part of this hits close to home for you, take a second. Drop a like, share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe more people should hear stories of quiet strength and transformation. You never know who might need to feel seen. By the middle of sophomore year, things slowly started to shift. I was no longer just the tired girl in the back row. I was becoming the student who always had the answers, the one professors referenced in class. My academic performance was sharp. My financial juggling act was holding. My world was still hard, but I could feel the tide turning. Professor Keller approached me after a seminar and asked if I'd consider applying for a research assistant role in the business department. It would pay more than the cafe and give me experience in exactly the field I wanted. I almost said no out of habit. Too busy, too tired. But then I remembered. I wasn't here just to survive. I applied. I got the position. Suddenly, I was assisting on a study about small business resilience, an irony that wasn't lost on me. Every hour spent analyzing case studies felt like I was also studying myself. I began connecting what I was living to what I was learning. My life wasn't just a hardship anymore. It was a case study in real-world strategy. That job didn't just pay the bills. It gave me purpose. I had a seat at the table, not because someone handed it to me, but because I had earned it through late nights, open wounds, and unwavering drive. For the first time, I started to feel like I was not just rebuilding, but rising. And slowly, the world began to reflect back what I had always hoped was true. I wasn't less than. I was built differently. Not softer, not easier, but stronger through fire. With every semester, I became more than a student. I became a builder. Inspired by what I learned in the research lab, I started developing a small side hustle: virtual assistants for small local businesses. At first, it was just helping with email or social media, but soon it turned into invoices, branding support, digital strategy. My first client was a bookstore owner I met through the cafe. She was overwhelmed, behind on marketing, and one afternoon I just offered, "I can help." She took a chance on me. In 3 months, her engagement doubled. She paid me in gift cards at first, then cash. Then she referred me to 2 others. And just like that, I had a business. I didn't shout it from the rooftops. I didn't even tell my parents. They still thought I was managing school and a part-time job. I let them keep their version of the story. Because the real one, the one I was living, it was so much bigger than anything they ever imagined for me. Between school, research, and my small but growing client list, I didn't have time for doubt anymore. My calendar was chaos. But it was my chaos. A chaos I created, managed, and thrived in. I wasn't waiting for the future to come. I was building it one invoice at a time. And maybe that's when I realized the power of turning pain into purpose. Every moment I had been underestimated became fuel. Every "you're not ready" became proof that I already was. And with each step, the vision got clearer. I wasn't just escaping the past. I was rewriting it. Junior year arrived and something felt different. I walked into campus not with fear, but with quiet certainty. My shoes weren't new, but I walked taller. My laptop still lagged, but I typed with confidence. I wasn't the same girl who had driven to college with nothing but grit in her trunk. I had changed, and the world around me was starting to notice. Professors were inviting me to panels. Classmates were asking for my feedback. My name was being mentioned in spaces I used to feel too small for. But I didn't feel like I was pretending anymore. I wasn't faking confidence. I was wearing it. Not like a mask, but like armor I'd forged myself. I hired 2 students to help with my growing business. I gave them flexible hours, fair pay, and mentorship, things I had to learn alone. I wanted to be the support system I never had. And in doing that, I realized I wasn't just succeeding. I was creating a model for others to rise to. That year, I applied for the university's Entrepreneurial Excellence Scholarship. I wasn't sure I'd get it. Those things always seem to go to students with connections. But when I received the email saying I'd won, I sat there frozen. Tuition for senior year, covered. Fully. I cried. Not because I needed the money anymore, but because someone, somewhere, had looked at all I had done and said, "You are worth investing in." And for the first time in a long time, I finally believed it too. It started with an email from the dean's office. I almost deleted it, thinking it was another campus-wide announcement. But when I opened it, I had to read it 3 times. They were inviting me, to be the student speaker at graduation. My first instinct, they must have made a mistake. My second, this was the moment I had built in silence for. Dean Alvarez said the business faculty had unanimously nominated me. "Your story represents what Westbridge stands for," she wrote. I stared at those words for a long time. For years I had been building without applause, and now without asking, they were giving me the mic. I felt a fire in my chest, equal parts pride and disbelief. I didn't tell my parents right away. I wasn't sure how they'd react. Part of me wanted to see their surprise in real time, but I told Grandma Jean first. When I did, she clapped her hands, teary-eyed, and whispered, "Finally, the world is catching up to what I've always seen." That moment felt bigger than the email itself. The university offered me mentorship with a speech coach, but I already knew what I wanted to say. My words had been living inside me for years, just waiting for the right stage. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reflection. I wanted someone like the younger version of me, sitting in silence, questioning their worth, to hear and believe, "You're not alone." As graduation neared, the air around me changed. Professors started referring to me as our keynote speaker. My name was printed in programs. I began receiving emails from students I didn't even know, saying my story had made its way around the department. I had become the voice of the class. And this time, no one could look away. A week before graduation, Lauren showed up at my door, unannounced. She looked unsure. Not polished, not confident, just human. She sat at my cluttered kitchen table, glanced around at the business binders, the takeout boxes, the whiteboard of deadlines. Then she said it. "I think I've been in a bubble this whole time." I didn't say anything. I waited, and she kept going. "I knew you were doing a lot, but I didn't realize it was all of this. I guess I just believed Mom and Dad when they said you were fine." Her voice cracked a little. "But you weren't, were you?" That was the first time she'd asked me a real question in years. I told her the truth, about the nights I couldn't afford groceries, about the jobs, the classes, the burnouts, about how I almost gave up more than once. Her face shifted with every word. Surprise, guilt, sorrow. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." And for once, I could tell she meant it. That night, we didn't fully reconcile, but we connected. She asked questions. She listened. She stayed until midnight, helping me pack gift bags for my team's end-of-year party. We weren't just sisters by blood anymore. We were becoming witnesses to each other's truths. And as she left, she hugged me tight and said, "I'll be in the front row when you speak. Not as your sister, but as your biggest fan." For the first time in forever, I believed her. The day of graduation arrived bright and windless. I woke early, put on the dress I'd saved up for, and carefully tied the stole Grandma Jean had embroidered for me, built from quiet strength. Zoe drove me to campus, beaming with pride. "You're about to own that stage," she said. And for once, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The ceremony was packed. Families cheering, cameras flashing, proud parents everywhere. I saw mine in the front row, sitting beside Lauren and Grandma Jean. My dad was adjusting his tie over and over. My mom looked around like she couldn't figure out how we got here. And honestly, I wasn't sure they could. When my name was called as the speaker, the auditorium erupted. I walked to the podium slowly, holding the weight of everything I'd carried for 4 years. And for a lifetime before that. I took a deep breath. Then I told the truth. About hard work. About invisible effort. About how we sometimes have to believe in ourselves long before anyone else does. I didn't name names, I didn't throw blame. But I made sure to say, this degree wasn't given. It was built, hour by hour, job by job, night after night. I saw people nodding, tearing up, even Lauren, wiping her eyes. I spoke to every student who had ever been told they weren't the right kind of brilliant, every person who had to climb with no one watching. And when I finished, the standing ovation wasn't just noise, it was release. It was recognition. It was proof that I had turned silence into strength, and strength into something unshakable. I looked at my parents as I stepped down. They didn't smile, they stared. Not with pride, but with something closer to reckoning. After my speech, the university president returned to the mic. "Before we conclude," he said, "we have one more special recognition." My heart was still pounding from the applause, but I froze when I heard my name again. Claire Whitmore has not only excelled academically, graduating with a 4.0 GPA, she also launched a business that now employs multiple students. The crowd murmured in admiration. I blinked hard, not just from surprise, but from something deeper, validation. Not just from professors or peers, but from a system that once felt so far above me. Then came the final blow. And what many of you don't know is that Claire did all of this while fully self-financing her education. Audible gasps, whispers, shifting in seats. I glanced at my parents. My mom's smile had faded. My dad sat still like the weight of truth had finally settled on him. They weren't just watching my success. They were being confronted with their absence in it. For the first time, the world knew what I had survived. And they couldn't rewrite the story anymore. The president then announced the creation of a new scholarship, the Claire Whitmore Resilience Fund, to support students overcoming personal or financial adversity. My knees went weak. I hadn't expected any of this. The audience stood again, clapping, some in tears. I stood still, overwhelmed, not with pride, but with release. That day, I didn't just graduate, I transformed. I walked off that stage not as someone who had something to prove, but as someone who had already proven it. Later that evening, the business school hosted a private reception for award recipients. I invited Grandma Jean, Zoe, and, yes, Lauren. I wasn't sure what my parents would do, but I left the invitation open. When they walked in, the room fell quiet. For once, they weren't the ones people gravitated toward. They were guests in my world now. Professors lined up to congratulate me. Industry partners asked for my business card. Zoe introduced herself as Claire's roommate, cheerleader, and backup proofreader. Grandma Jean cried every few minutes. And Lauren? She stood quietly to the side, observing, processing, watching people approach me with genuine respect. Eventually, my parents approached. My dad extended his hand awkwardly. "You've really built something," he said, eyes flicking to the award on the table. My mom added, "We're very proud of you, Claire." But the words didn't land the way they once might have. It was too late for applause to carry meaning. I just nodded. Lauren, however, didn't let it slide. "You know," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "Claire did this without a penny from either of you. Imagine what she could have done if you'd actually believed in her." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. For me. It was clarifying. I didn't humiliate them. I didn't retaliate. I just excused myself and returned to my people. Because the version of me that once craved their approval, she didn't exist anymore. That night, Grandma Jean pulled me aside, pressing something into my palm, a delicate bracelet with a tiny engraved charm that read, "Worth it." She whispered, "You've become the woman I always hoped you'd be, on your own terms." I hugged her tight, fighting back tears. This wasn't just her pride, it was her belief made real. Zoe clinked her glass and toasted, "To the quiet one who built louder than anyone." My classmates clapped. Lauren raised her glass too. For the first time, I wasn't the girl standing in someone else's shadow. I was leading the room, on my own light, in my own rhythm. My phone buzzed with a message from the university, an offer for a feature article in their alumni magazine. I smiled, not for the exposure, but for what it symbolized. I had taken every "you can't" and turned it into impact. Not just for me, but for every student who felt unseen. As we left the reception, Lauren asked if I wanted to stay at Grandma's house for a few days. Like a reset, just us, she said. I nodded. The sisterhood we were rebuilding wasn't perfect, but it was honest now. That was more than I'd ever hoped for. And as I stepped into the quiet night, diploma in hand, legacy unfolding, I realized I didn't need to be chosen anymore. I had already chosen myself, and that choice had changed everything. For most of my life, I thought success meant proving people wrong. I thought it looked like applause, big titles, maybe even forgiveness. But standing where I am now, I see it differently. Success is quiet. It's internal. It's the way you sleep at night knowing you kept your integrity while the world tried to shrink you. My degree didn't fix everything. My accomplishments didn't erase the years I spent overlooked. But they did something more important. They showed me who I am when no one's watching. That's real confidence. Not noise, not ego. Just a calm knowing. I became someone I'm proud of. Success, I've learned, isn't always about the finish line. Sometimes, it's just about continuing when no one's clapping, showing up for yourself, choosing your future over their approval. And for people like me, people who weren't born with a safety net, it's also about creating ladders for others to climb too. That's why the scholarship matters. That's why the business I built isn't just about money. It's about proving that overlooked doesn't mean incapable. It means undiscovered. And people like us, we don't need rescuing. We just need someone to believe. And when no one else does, we believe in ourselves. So if you're watching this and thinking, that sounds like me, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just building, quietly, persistently. And I promise you, that kind of strength, it lasts. Maybe you've been the overlooked sibling, or the student who works 3 jobs just to keep up, or the dreamer with no audience. Maybe your name hasn't been called yet, but that doesn't mean it never will. Your path may be different, but it's still valid, still worthy, still powerful. I know what it's like to question your worth because the people around you couldn't see it, but their blindness doesn't define your value. Your quiet hustle, your invisible progress, that matters. It's building something no one can take from you, because it's rooted in your truth, not their permission. You don't need the spotlight to grow. You just need space, and when no one gives it to you, you carve it out. And eventually, they'll have no choice but to see what you've built. And more importantly, you'll finally see it for yourself. So wherever you are in your journey, please keep going. The path may not be fair, it may not be fast, but it is yours. And that means it's enough. You are enough. Even if they never said it. Even if they still can't. And if this story feels a little too familiar, that's because you're not alone. Not anymore. If Claire's journey touched something in you, take a moment. Leave a comment below. Share your story, no matter how messy or unfinished it feels. Because every time someone speaks their truth, someone else realizes they're not the only one feeling this way. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them. These aren't just stories. They're lifelines. They're reminders that silence doesn't mean weakness, and invisibility doesn't mean failure. They're proof that sometimes the ones no one expects become the ones no one can ignore. Don't forget to like the video if it moved you, and subscribe if you believe in giving voice to stories like Claire's, stories that don't always get told but absolutely deserve to be heard. And who knows, maybe your story will be next. We're building something here, not just a channel, but a community, a space for people who rise quietly and fiercely. Even when no one's looking, if that sounds like you, you're exactly where you belong.